Welcome back, everyone. Nice to see you all here. When I began doing research and speaking on the subject of near-death experiences, what really flummoxed me were questions about distressing NDEs. And then along came Nancy Evans Bush with her book, Dancing Past the Dark, which was breakthrough in terms of how do we explain distressing NDEs. And then, most recently, her book, Buddha in Hell and Other Alarms, which I love that title. So then it occurred to me that maybe Nancy Evans Bush had always been around, and it's true she has. Since 1982, did I say that well? Since 1982, she's been associated with IONS, was their first executive director and later president. And she has been profoundly impactful to me and to other researchers as we look into this arena of trying to unravel what it means, the symbolism that's involved with distressing NDEs. So, would you please welcome Nancy Evans Bush?
Thank you, Scott. For those of you who have not heard me speak before, I begin with an introduction to my voice. I am not terrified. I am not about to cry. I am not weak. I am not going to fall over. I have a condition called spasmodic dysphonia, which those of you who are familiar with Diane Rehm of public radio will recognize. I have no control over it. I may be clear as a bell one moment and wavering the next, but hey, we just learn to put up with it.
We love you anyway.
So, thank you, Phyllis. Our topic today is the Buddha in hell when spiritually transformative is confounding. Now, any spiritual transformation is going to be surprising, alarming, glorious, confounding one way or another. But some experiences defy description. Now, imagine for a moment that I am a 60-year-old Burmese man, and I look at you and I say, I used to be a Buddhist monk, but then I had a near-death experience, and it told me that if I don't believe in Jesus, I'm going to hell. How can I understand this? Does anyone here have an answer? I doubt it, because this is one of the most confounding NDEs I have ever heard of. He is himself confused. But I'm intrigued partly because of my own near-death experience, which now goes back 55 years. The essence of it is that his experience is the inverse of mine. He is a Buddhist who has a Christian doctrine experience. I was a New England Protestant who had an experience with an essentially Buddhist message and definite Buddhist imagery, which I did not recognize until years later. So the question originated in how does this happen? How does Christianity get into the experience of a Buddhist who has been living a monastic life in Burma? How did the yin-yang symbol get into my experience when I recognized it only as those funny circles? How does this happen? Well, to do a thorough answer of that would take more time than we've got today. So for today, I'm going to look at the question of when any NDE is totally confusing and we don't know how to make sense of it, how can we proceed? Now, I go into this with two premises. The first is that most importantly, we have to remember, and this is kind of subtle, but it's essential. We say, oh, we're going to talk about this man's NDE. No, we are not. We don't have a clue what his experience was. What we know is what his account says his experience was. We have no access. The only person who has ever had access to his experience is the Buddhist himself. And as soon as the experience was over, as soon as that state of consciousness had gone, he no longer had access to the experience. David McKinley, just a few minutes ago, talked about trying to get back to home, back to his experience. But once we have left the state of consciousness, we have left the experience. So what we are talking about is an account of an experience. Secondly, several times today we've heard mention of we are not to judge the experience. And that's my premise too. Our purpose in advancing on any NDE account is discernment. We are to be careful. We are to avoid hasty labeling. It seems it seems unfortunate to have to say this, but the phrase nut job is not part of the vocabulary. We hear it all the time. We hear, man, that's weird. Man, crazy. Is he, a little, It is not our job to judge at that level. It is to listen, to soak it all in, and hopefully, if asked, to offer some help with interpreting it. Somewhere in Myanmar, which used to be Burma, there is a man, almost 60, who was a Buddhist monk and who has been wandering in a combination of conviction and utter confusion, wandering from church to church, selling audio tapes of his account. He has been doing this for years, maybe 20 years. Now, to read the entire experience would take way too long, so I have abstracted it. There is, once you get home, please don't pull out your cell phones now. If you Google the Buddha in hell, you will find more information about this than you can believe. Arguments, forums, debates, articles, fundamentalist Christian tracts, a few outraged Buddhist comments. The YouTube has a really good reading illustrated of his experience, the account from which this summary is taken. The man was born in the Irrawaddy Delta in 1958. Irrawaddy Delta is a complex of rivers and streams. It's kind of like the Louisiana Delta. He left school at 13 to become a fisherman, and what that meant, he was going into the rivers and streams in an incredibly rickety boat by himself as a fisherman. By the time he was 17, he was the leader of a boat. But while he was 17, the boat, rickety as it was attacked by a crocodile, and crocodiles in those waters can grow to be 16 to 20 feet long, which is substantially longer than many of the boats. Smashed the boat to pieces, and the crew escaped with their lives, vowing, at least the leader vowed, he was never going to be a fisherman again, and he became a monk instead, which seems perfectly sensible. Along about the year 2000, he contracted malaria, and he says yellow fever. He was discharged from the hospital to die. Go home and die. We can do nothing more for you. The monks were taking care of him, and he had this near-death experience. He says, I was fully alert in a very, very powerful storm. A tremendous wind flattened the whole landscape until there was just a flat plain. I was all alone. After some time, I crossed a river. On the other side of the river, I saw a terrible, terrible lake of fire. In Buddhism, we do not have a concept of a place like this. In the lake, he sees Yama, the Buddhist god of hell. And he asks, what is your name? And Yama, who has the body of a lion and the legs of a serpent, says, I am the king of hell, the destroyer. His face was very fierce. I was extremely afraid. He looks at the lake and he sees people. First, he sees the saffron yellow robes that Buddhist monks wear. And then he sees a figure and he says, it's my teacher. He was the most famous monk in all of Burma. Why is he in this lake of fire? And Yama, the Buddhist king, says he is in the lake of fire because he did not believe in Jesus Christ. That's why he's here. In the fire, he sees someone he doesn't recognize. The man has long hair pulled over to one side. And Yama says, that is the Gotama Buddha. And the monk says, the Buddha, what is he doing in the lake of fire? And Yama says, he did not believe in the eternal God. That's why he is here. Next, there is someone in army uniform with a terrible chest wound. Who is that? And Yama says, that is the great hero Aung San. He's the revolutionary leader who freed Burma from colonial rule. And the man says, but, he's a hero. But he did not believe in Jesus Christ. And finally, there is one more man, a great, tall, towering man who has a sword and a shield. And Yama says, this is Goliath. Goliath. You've never heard of him, but when you become a Christian, then you will know who he is. He is here because he blasphemed King David and the eternal God. Next, the monk is taken to a place where he sees a group of rich and poor people eating their dinner. He sees another king of hell and a terrifying demon with 10 horns and a spear in his hand that had 7 sharp blades on the end. His job is to stoke the fires. And he says, this being asked me, are you going into the lake of fire too? And I said, no, I'm only here to observe. And the creature said, you're right, you came here just to observe. I can't find your name here. The monk comes to a fork in the road. The left side is very wide and spacious, but he quickly discovers it's very dangerous. This road is for the people who do not believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. And 2 men going down the road ahead of him are doing fine until suddenly they are stabbed and they drop dead. And he realizes this is a bad place. So he goes back to the fork and takes the narrow road, which very quickly turns to gold. And he hears beautiful music. And a man in a white robe asks the monk to walk with him. And the man asks his name, and the man in white answered, I am the one who holds the king's keys to heaven. My name is Peter. Well, Peter told the monk to watch in the north. Look to the north and you will see God create man. And an angel went to God and said, don't do that. If you create him, he will grieve you. And a note in the transcription says that the Burmese for this is, you will lose face if you create man. But he watches and God breathes on the man and he comes to life. Then Peter said, we're almost through with this reading. Then Peter said to go back and speak to the people who worship Buddha and who worship idols. Tell them they must go to hell if they don't change. Those who build temples and idols will go to hell. Those who give offerings to the monks to earn merit for themselves will go to hell. All those who pray to the monks and call them by respectful titles will go to hell. Those who chant and give life to idols, and all those who don't believe in Jesus Christ will go to hell. Peter gives the man a new name, Paul, who came back to life. Angels looked in a book, but none of his names were there, not his birth name or his monk's name or the new name. And Peter says, your name is not written here, you must go back. Peter shows him a ladder that reached down from the heaven to the sky and stopped in midair. On the ladder, I saw many angels. Peter said, they are messengers of God. They are reporting to heaven the names of all those who believe in Jesus Christ and the names of those who don't believe. Then Peter told me it was time to go back. The next thing he heard was the sound of weeping. And he heard his mother's voice crying out. And he realized he was lying in a box. And he was lying in smelly, sticky liquid, which he soon realized was coming from his decaying body. He says, when I started to move, my parents shouted, he's alive! But many other people cried out, it's a ghost! And they ran away as fast as their legs could carry them. Moments later, the lid of my coffin would have been nailed shut, and I would have been cremated. I immediately started to explain the things I had seen and heard. I told them about the men in the lake of fire. I told them that only the Christians know the truth, that our forefathers and us have been deceived for thousands of years. I told them everything we believe is a lie. The people were astonished because they knew what kind of a monk I had been and how zealous I was for the teachings of the Buddha. I had already been recorded as dead, but you see, now I am alive. There's an epilogue on the transcription. Despite great opposition, the man's experiences were so real to him that he has not wavered. After many years in the Buddhist monkhood, as a strict follower of Buddhist teachings, he immediately proclaimed the gospel of Christ following his resurrection and exhorted other monks to forsake all false gods and follow Jesus Christ with all their hearts. Before the time of his sickness and death, he had no exposure to Christianity at all. Everything he learned during those 3 days in the grave was new to his mind. Well, the first question I think we have to ask is, what is our reaction? What do we make of this? What do you make of it? I am hearing a stunned silence. Yeah. I can tell you the responses of a group of, at least some responses from a forum in Singapore. I'm so glad I could find responses from that part of the world, so it isn't just like us hearing ourselves talk. One says, I hope it's true. The Buddha is indeed very brave. He went to hell. He did not want to leave them to suffer. Someone else asks, are humans just pawns in a spiritual battle? 3, God must be the most cruel guy to create hell, let alone to let the Buddha go there. 4, Which culture allow a decaying body exposed before cremating? Can you tell me that your family would go to that kind of funeral, that the body was decayed? Reasonable question. 5, NDEs are not evidence. 6, this is a classic example of using fear to indoctrinate religion. 7, Jesus saves. 8, poor him for not feeling secure enough in his own religion and wanting to make Buddhists believe in what he believes. 9, this type of story can only be accepted as true by deluded person. And my favorite, this is a load of crab. There's one more comment. A concerned Christian ministry has investigated and interviewed the said person who was the so-called monk. They found it full of holes, and the man continuously contradicted himself on many occasions and could not point them to a single person who could verify his story and is unemployed. No editorializing there. Now, does the account, here we are now determining, is this a real NDE? We've got thousands of people in Burma, and thanks to Google and YouTube around the world, arguing. Some people say it's a hoax. Other people say it's true. How do we come to our own conclusion? And I think the first thing we have to look at is, does the account have recognizable elements of an NDE? What do you see? I see some of you saying yes. What do you see that's recognizable? Okay, I see a journey. I see a river. I see spiritual entities. I see, in some cases, that lake of fire. There's a message. Did he get a message to bring back? You better believe he got a message to bring back. So, okay. What else? Does the person's life indicate that something happened? You think? Why are you all just staring at me? You're not saying anything. Does his... Well, you can yell. At least nod. He is no longer a Buddhist monk. If we had time enough, we could say whether his account changed over time. The observers on site say his testimony has never wavered. And that certainly sounds like an NDE. But at the same time, there are all these problems. There are more problems than this cursory reading can begin to say. There are factual questions. Are there really crocodiles that big in those streams? that could smash a boat? Well, his experience probably took place long enough ago that, yeah, I Googled it, and they're big. And if you go to that YouTube video, you'll see a picture. What about the age at which you can become a monk? He says he became a monk when he was 19. But I thought the law said you had to be 20. That kind of question is raised, mostly by people who, so far as I can tell, seem to be Buddhists in Burma. There are questions about deliberate untruths or exaggerations. Was he really decaying when he woke up? Is that possible? Is it likely? Can we believe it? Moral and spiritual unknowables. For me, the biggest unknowable is, how am I to accept the idea that there is a lake of fire inhabited by the Buddhist god of hell who is preaching Christian doctrine? And that produces a kind of cognitive dissonance which I find difficult to know how to deal with. What? Why is Yama preaching that you have to believe in Jesus Christ? Does not compute. The thing we have to remember in all of this, again, is we do not have access to his experience. What we have is access to this account, and here is perhaps the biggest problem of all. What you hear me read, what you hear on YouTube, is not Burmese. It's an English translation of the monk's experience account, which he narrates in Burmese. There is no indication that I have found that he even speaks English. Now, maybe he does, but he certainly is not the one who narrates on the YouTube in unaccented English. So this raises a whole host of questions, one of which is, it's interesting that it's not that what is said is, it's not that it is preaching doctrine, but it is an evidence of a Christian attitude that doesn't know much about Buddhism, and that is when Peter says, go back and tell the Buddhist people who worship Buddha and worship idols. They don't worship Buddha. Buddha is a human. They may revere the teachings, they do revere the teachings, but they don't worship the Buddha the way we worship God, or the way many Christians worship Jesus. It's a different category of faith. And what it indicates, it's not the only place that does this, is that what we have here, just as in any any religious document which has been translated, we have the ghost of the redactor. We have the ghost of the translator who read the Burmese and thought, oh, that's not quite right. Oh, I think if we just change the wording here a little bit. Oh, let's just know this can't be. So we have this layering of a Christian voice over the Buddhist voice, an almost certainly American voice over the Burmese voice. But behind all these words, there is a man now 60 years or so old who had a transformative experience, and his experience is hiding behind these words. The reality of him and his life experience we can't get to. Many people are saying, oh, that story is such a hoax. And I say to anyone who uses the word hoax about any near-death experience, let us keep in mind young Alex Malarkey, the boy who was featured in The Boy Who Came Back from Heaven, which was pulled from the shelves as a hoax after he recanted his experience. He was 6 years old when he and his dad were in a terrible auto accident. Alex was left a quadriplegic, but he could still speak. And after 2 weeks in a coma, he could tell his dad, I saw angels take you out of the car and put you by the side of the road. The police report says that the father was thrown from the car. Alex told his dad that he went to heaven. He says he saw Jesus. Didn't just see him, he had a conversation. Time went by. The father and mother separated. They have since divorced. The father wrote a book about Alex and the accident and his experience in heaven. He had more conversations with Alex about, tell me what you saw, son. But Alex has been living with his mother, who is a literal believing Bible literalist, who very quickly after the whole accident said, oh, that couldn't have happened. That's not in the Bible. That contradicts biblical teaching. The book came out in 2010. In 2015, Alex said, I made it up. It never happened. I lied. I didn't go to heaven. I didn't see Jesus. It's not what the Bible says, so I just made it up. Here is a kid now in his late teens who has been hounded into disavowing his own NDE. And all you have to do is Google Alex Malarkey and you will find pages of press accounts about the boy and the hoax, the boy who lied about this experience. We need to be very careful when we claim hoax. So how can we think about this? Well, we can, like Alex's mother, take the monk's account as literally true, as the monk did. Okay, he went to hell, and he saw a lake of fire, and these very good people were there because they had the wrong beliefs. And there is no recourse. If we can step back a little farther and take the literal out, we can begin to get a wider view in which we can say, you know, there are 90 places in the Bible where fire is referred to as meaning the presence of God. Well, if we look at it that way, those guys are okay, maybe uncomfortable for now, but hey, they are marinating in God. If we do that kind of thinking, it begins to shift our awareness, begins to shift the range of opportunities. Are we right? Are we wrong? At this stage, it really doesn't matter. We have to see what we can find that can give the experience credence or help us say, no, on these grounds, I cannot believe the truth of this account. And there's another problem here for some of us, which is that can't possibly be an NDE. That isn't an NDE. There's no tunnel, there's no light. There is certainly no unconditional love. That is no NDE. You know, all these years I have been talking to audiences about my exasperation at the difficulty we have in accepting the idea that suffering does not always necessarily mean punishment. Maybe suffering is what can get us eventually into a mode of thinking, into a mode of being that enables us to find out who we truly are. Every one of us has our dark corners. Every one of us has things of which we are terrified, things we don't want anyone to know, including God. But until we are brave enough to look into our own darkness, the darkness is always going to be there, obscuring our view of the light. Do I think this is a bona fide NDE? Yes, I think he had an NDE. Do I think the one transcribed into English is it? Almost certainly not. What do I think he has said? I have not got a clue because I don't know the man, nor do I speak a word of Burmese. Sometimes we have to say we just aren't going to know on this one. But we have to keep looking, we have to keep listening, both inwardly and outwardly. Now, I certainly hope some of you have questions. Anything but why.
I don't know if this is a question, but I absolutely was chilled from the moment I heard you speak. The way you presented your speech, there was a warble in your voice, but that disappeared. I felt spirit coming through you. I was knocked over. I got that chill that I get when I feel spirit at work. And I thank you so much for that. I was routed out of bed. I had a terrible headache, and I was late for that reason. But man, I'm so glad I caught what I did. Now, I wanted to ask you a question. I had a bummer experience. I had 2 good ones and 1 bummer one. I never was into drugs, but someone said this was liquid marijuana, and I tried it and it didn't work, and I kept taking sips of it. And I got into this dimension, and I remember saying to myself, I will never get out of this. This must be what hell is like. There's no time here. And a voice said to me, you're still in form. So I do believe there are the bummer experiences, because I had one. And, I have friends that use narcotics. They say these narcotics are their sacraments. I don't touch other people's lives because I don't know how God communicates with others. But if you have anything that you can say in regards to my bummer experience, if you've heard about other people's, because it scared the heck out of me. And to me, drugs, any kind of thing, mind altering, is for people who can't handle their minds. They need outside stuff. And I wonder what they're going to do when they cross over, because they're out of a body. They can't get the stuff physically. But it was something that I still come back to. It was a bummer experience. And I was, I thought, wow, I'm glad I'm still in form. But had I not been in form, would I ever have gotten out of that place? I still think about that. Thank you.
You do get to the heart of things. I think where we need to take this, as Western culture, we are still dealing with the mentality of materialism. And people listen to this, we have our own experiences, and we say, oh, is hell real? And real to us means somehow physical. I think we need to shift our thinking. I think it's this old argument of what's real. Is his experience real? Of course it's real. Your experience is real. My experience was real as an experience. Was it real in terms of a physical location? I think that part of it is not helpful. I can't even say I think that. All I can say is the way I am trying to approach things these days is to see it as an indication of a state of consciousness in which the experience is very real in experiential terms. Now, let me say, there's a whole chunk of today's presentation which never made it into the outline because it would take too much time. And that's the discussion of the question you're asking about how do we approach these? How do we understand these? My experience was 55 years ago. It took me until about 10 years ago to think I had found an explanation for it that satisfied me that it made sense both spiritually and cosmologically. Have I sat around for 40 years thinking, well, no, what is the cosmological explanation? No. You go one thought at a time, one sleepless night at a time, one tear-stained episode at a time to sort things through. But is it true? Yes, experientially it's true. And we live out of our experiences, as we've been hearing all day today. Why did my experience not include the kind of love other people have talked about all day? I listened to David and so many of you, and I think, so what am I, chopped liver? What did I do? And some questions don't have answers, like the question about today's NDE. We don't know. How do we approach experiences like ours that give us so much angst? We learn to live through them and to come out on the other side. I know that's not particularly helpful, but it's all I've got. PMH, see me afterwards.
We're almost out of time. I want to applaud your work. I want to applaud what you're saying. You know my research. I learned early on never to judge. Sometimes heavenly experiences destroy people's lives.
Yes.
Sometimes hellish experiences is the best thing that could have ever happened to that individual, and it opens new doors. You cannot judge, and you cannot say that a near-death experience is a certain parade of events. Did you realize, I think you do, hopefully most people do, that the tunnel is actually not that frequent? It only happens in about a fourth or maybe more of the cases. You can go back in history and find that the tunnel is a media event, that it was used by the media to sensationalize Raymond Moody's first book. Before that, that's when Gallup Poll did their famous study and found that only 9% of the people in the United States ever reported a tunnel. Are you going to call that a signature event? No way. Let's be more open here in accepting and just accepting these experiences as they are, because we don't know what they were thinking. We don't know what their culture is. Let's just be open to the patterns, because that's what helps us grow. Thank you.
Thanks, BMH. I'm hoping that by next year's conference, maybe I will have more to say about how did these things happen. It's a fascinating study. What is real?
I look forward to that next year. What is Real by Nancy Evans Bush. Give her one more hand. That was fabulous.